Our topic today is leadership and accountability. Let me repeat, leadership and accountability. The reason why I want to speak about accountability is the fact that this is one of the biggest challenges that we're facing in our nation, both in the public sector and the private sector. And let's be honest, both public sector and private sector. We've seen serious governance failure in the highest echelons of leadership of whether state-owned enterprises or government departments or health sector or every sector. We've seen this. The same in private sector. We've seen serious failures of governance and lack of accountability. And this is a major challenge in our nation, and not only in our nation, throughout the whole world. So it's very important that we speak about accountability. We at ULP have even started a program called ULP Governance. It's an online course that is really helping particularly board members, that is top leadership of any organization, to really understand what is their accountability and governance whenever their role they play. But today I want to talk about accountability in the context of an employer-employee relationship, in the context of a manager and subordinate relationship, because that relationship is so critical in order for performance to reach its highest delivery in terms of results. Many people do not leave the company, but they leave their boss. And that's why we need to talk about accountability in that context. I want to focus in that context. Now, the reason why accountability has become perceived as negative in that context of a boss, manager, subordinate, it has become perceived negative connotations because of a number of things. The first one is when things go wrong in a department, in a company, in an organization, the leaders, what do? They blame others. They don't take accountability. They just blame their team, and they want to demonstrate the shortcomings of their teams. They speak ill of their teams, and they speak ill of the person who reports to the boss, the manager. The second reason is that once that happened, maybe a mistake has happened, something has gone wrong, then there's micromanagement, and there's this emotional, mean-spirited conversation that takes place. In fact, the person really wants to be mean and obviously mete out punishment. Nothing wrong with holding people accountable, but when you start managing people in a micromanagement way. Let's just pause here. Let me just give you a little bit of a story so that you can understand the context of what I'm talking about. If you are a leader, you need to deal with that person who has done something that is wrong. Don't generalize. I remember in one of companies I worked for, there was one guy who was misusing a credit card. And all of us, when you're young and you get a credit card, and all of a sudden you do not know the difference between a company credit card and a personal credit card, and you start living off the company credit card and you go to do your shopping using the company credit card. Personal things. Now, instead of the leadership to deal with that individual, they started micromanaging all credit cards. In fact, they started putting so many rules and regulations on the entire organization about credit cards and the limits, and they started taking credit cards away from people, certain levels of people, and you needed approval for all sorts of things. It just became a bureaucratic, and an entire department was set up just to manage credit cards, micromanaging such a small item. So that's what I mean about micromanagement. You end up actually breathing over the shoulders of people and in the name of accountability. That's not accountability. That's disempowerment. That's actually undermining the intelligence of people. So leaders must stop pointing fingers and start asking questions on how to avoid mistakes, near misses. Let's talk about safety, for instance. You can hold people accountable on safety. But if you hold them in a way that you become mean-spirited when there's an accident or incident that has happened, and people then get afraid to actually talk about it and rectify that mistake, you're going to get serious hiding of information, which can lead to serious accidents and disaster and fatalities because you didn't understand what accountability means. It's very important that we're clear about it. So let me park there. Let's now move to really the matter that I want to focus on. We have to hold people accountable. And we must make sure that accountability is a culture of the organization. And therefore, all of us must be held accountable. Nobody should be excused from accountability. Even more when you're leaders. The reason why we are not able to hold people accountable, let's just itemize why there's such a lack of accountability. Number one, we excuse people. That seems to give us a lot of logical reasons why they didn't do that, why they didn't achieve their targets, why they made that mistake, and particularly in achieving targets. Let me tell you, particularly young leader, as you emerge as a young leader, you're not paid for excuses, you're paid for delivery. Let me repeat this. You're not paid for excuses, you are paid for delivery. And everybody, every leader, in all spheres of our life, you're not rewarded for excuses. You're rewarded for delivery. So we cannot accept excuses. The second thing, we allow emotion to cloud our decision making when it comes to really holding people accountable. And by emotions, this is my brother, this is my sister. This is comrade. Hey, comrade. You can't expose the comrade. You can't hold the comrade accountable. And that is the reason why we've got such failure of governance, particularly in public sector. It's because, hey, comrade. Hey, comrade or no comrade, I'm telling you, hold people accountable. The third one, we avoid difficult conversations about performance. It's easy to pussyfoot here and basically not tell the truth and say, hey, but we agreed you're going to be finished by this time and you haven't delivered by this time. That's it. And this is not acceptable. Fourthly, we practice what I call avoidance instead of accountability. You just avoid talking about crucial conversation. That is the reason why we've got such serious failure in holding people accountable as leaders and holding ourselves accountable as leaders. So, in order to create a climate that is successful for accountability to thrive in the organization, the first thing that you need to do is make sure that the expectations are clear and everyone understands it. Everyone is absolutely clear what needs to be achieved, what are the objectives. We are sure of the common definition of success. We need to understand that when we define success, this is what we mean. And then those expectations must be measurable. We must be able to say, we have arrived. The rewards must be clear. Let's be clear. Let's talk a little bit about rewards. First, in an employee-employer relationship, manager-subordinate relationship, there's performance, merit, increase. That's one level of reward. It must be clear that you're going to get an increase, not just because you've been around for 12 months. You are going to get the increase because you've achieved these 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5 KPIs, key performance indicators. Secondly, short-term incentive. When are you going to get the short-term incentive? And we're going to get it because it's very clear in terms of your scorecard, and it's measurable and it's auditable. You're going to get your short-term incentives. The third, are you going to get a long-term incentive because you're a good employer who want to retain you into this organization? Long-term incentives. And long-term incentives are very important because you can be successful because you've taken shortcuts and you achieve short-term results, but we want sustainability of the organization. So long-term incentives run into 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, because you must take decisions and achieve results that are sustainable. We've seen too many people, smart CEOs or smart managers who take quick decisions, but they are very short term. So rewards must be very clear. So it's important to be able to hold people accountable even for the long range decision that they're taking. Now, let's pause there a little bit and just reflect again. We must create a climate where we can hold people accountable. Be clear on expectations, measure them, hold people accountable, making sure that the rewards are very aligned with the achievement of the goals that have been set. And be very clear that you are not going to get the rewards if you did not achieve the results. I promise you, I've been around the block many years. There were years in my life where I worked so hard, I was so busy. But when it comes to checking whether I have achieved the specific agreed results that were signed in my performance charter, bang, they were not achieved. I did not get an incentive, whether short-term, long-term, doesn't matter. I did not get it. And it's very important that we're clear on that and we are fair on that. We do it very clear because there's nothing that really get people to jump up and down and really perform when it hits their pocket. So it's very important that you do that. Now, as we continue creating this culture of accountability, there's certain behavior that we need to adopt. One of the things that you need to be clear about is that bad news does not improve with age. In other words, don't avoid and postpone to deal with performance. Avoiding performance issues will not improve the performance. You have to deal with them and deal with them immediately, always. And you have to speak frankly, but with sensitivity. I don't like these managers that basically because there's a performance issue, now you've got to swear at people, you've got to scream at their at the top of your voice, you're going to treat them like little babies, as if they're your children. Even your children, you don't speak to them like that. Speak frankly, firmly, assertively, but respect the human dignity of a person you're speaking to. Deal with performance issues. Don't make it personal. It is not personal. You're talking with the person, not about them. Don't go around and gossiping about them. Hey, so-and-so does not perform. Hey, so-and-so does not deliver results. And the person is triangulated and he hears it from somebody else instead of you saying, listen, you have not achieved your target. Very important, because once you triangulate, it creates an atmosphere that is toxic, it destroys trust, destroys credibility, especially for you as a leader. And then when you are engaging in this discussion, keep to the facts. Facts are, we agree that you will achieve the sales target of X, you achieve the target of Y. You didn't achieve X. That's a fact. And then, so how are we going to do, what are we going to do to improve so that you achieve the target of X? I don't want anything less than X. You talk, you put a plan together, and you help, you support, you train, you empower if need be, and you record the performance agreement of that session. And if somebody doesn't perform, doesn't improve, then you have to implement punishment. But you do it in this way. First, professionally, and secondly, it must be consistent to every person. And finally, it must be with dignity. In other words, you remain professional, but you execute and implement punishment. And you do it fairly and consistently. So it doesn't mean that when your friend has not performed, he gets off the hook. But you do it with dignity. It is very important that we as leaders create a culture of accountability. Because let's be honest about this. You can put a lot of rules and regulations, and if people are just there just to comply, I promise you, people are smart. They will always find a way out. They will always find a way of defrauding the company. They will find a way of violating governance. They will find a way of downright stealing. It's just that's a reality. But you need to create a culture. Culture is something that will hold people like a glue, that they know that here we don't do wrong things. So the culture must be driven from the top. And it starts with the leadership. And the most important thing is the character of the leaders. The character of the leaders must be impeccable. It must be leaders that their yes is yes, their no is no. And they are very, very serious about driving the culture of accountability. And they hold themselves accountable. So it must be men and women of character. Secondly, there must be unity of purpose. In an organization where there's no clarity of purpose, therefore unity is very difficult. You cannot have team playing together, knowing that we all have to score that goal. So teamwork, unity, critical. Number 3, in creating a culture, you must creating a culture that promotes learning and development. People must be able to try things out. They must learn from their mistakes. They must be able to prepare to even expand their own horizon, both intellectually, and be able to develop and create that learning culture and a continuous improvement in what we do. So that it's very important that every human being wants to develop and grow. You create that culture, people will feel they're part of this organization. And when they're held accountable, they will know that it's because you are interested in their learning and growth. We must also focus on tracking and monitoring. Let me tell you, there's an expression which says people don't do what is expected, but they do what is inspected. Let me repeat that. They don't do what is expected. They do what is inspected. So you have to track, you have to monitor, you may make sure that people understand, and there must be very clear tracking mechanisms, even if it means you put it on a board. I know in sales organization, they will have sales targets, and they will show them in the form of a barometer every day where we are, and let the people know that this is where we are in terms of tracking and monitoring and evaluation. Very important. And then in this culture, there must be a sense of urgency. One of the reasons why we've got poor service delivery is because people are just not held accountable. They don't have a sense of urgency. They don't have a sense of delivery. They don't have a sense of pride in their job, which leads to reputation of them. culture must be the culture that promotes the reputation of the company. It's very, very clear that the company that has got a poor culture has got poor reputation. And normally the most dangerous thing about lack of accountability is just that it destroys the credibility of the company or the organization. People just don't trust because you don't meet your promises, you don't fulfill your promises, you don't keep your promises, and there's no reputation left. And if there's no reputation, you're dead in the water. The currency of trading in the world today is your reputation. And this culture must continuously evolve in the new 4IR, for instance. There may be a need to be more customer-centric. There may be a need to have a culture that is high-tech, that is agile, that is problem-solving. It must continuously evolve because the problems that we're facing are evolving all the time. They are new, they are different, and therefore the culture must be able to be agile. So, in conclusion, I just want to say as leaders, we need to instill the culture of accountability wherever you are, starting at your home. Make sure at home there's a culture of accountability. And then you move on, whether you're going to school, make sure there's a kind of culture of accountability in your school. In our communities, in our companies, in government, in our state, we need to all rally around this principle of accountability in order to ensure that our nation becomes one of the great nations that will be able to make a huge difference, particularly in our continent, and be a beacon of hope and example that we hold people accountable, including the top leaders, both of the nation, of the companies, or state-owned enterprises, so that we can be able to make a huge difference in changing the lives of our people, particularly fighting against poverty, unemployment, and inequality. And even more, with the scourge of gender-based violence, we as men need to hold our own brothers accountable so that we can destroy and defeat the scourge of gender-based violence. Thank you.
Principles are so important, and an ethical leader prioritizes principles over personal gain, and his or her value continuously enhanced over time.
If you think that you're going to run this on a rules basis, you'll find consistently the rules are insufficient. You've got to ultimately rely on the principles.
So the whole point of the board meeting is to deliberate on and to decide on matters within the ambit or the scope of the board. So Section 73 goes further to talk about how resolutions and voting is done. Each director has one vote, and a majority of votes in favor of a resolution means that the matter is approved.
When you damage a relationship, you are unethical. If you damage a relationship with your employer, with your shareholder, with your stakeholder, with a citizen of the country, or with the government, you are being unethical. Because you can do lots of things which is legal, but it's unethical.
If you are competent and not ethical, chances are you will commit sooner rather than later one of the sins that will actually nullify your competence. Doing right and avoiding wrong is all very well, but unless your leadership, your corporate governance rests on those two, you're not going to be a good leader.
Best thing to protect yourself is to let people know who you are. Disclosure is critical. Otherwise you become a prisoner, a permanent prisoner.
People perceive, even if it's not the case, that your private friend may gain advantages because of the friendship that they have. If they became friends of mine, I would be harsher on them just to prove that that's not the case, which is unfair.
The importance of this program would be to kind of shape the future leaders and equipping us right now with the right corporate governance and ethical leadership steps on what to do. I feel like going forward in the future and in our leadership journeys, this is a good step.
With corporate governance, there's an opportunity for us to do things better in such a way that we build up and we create a system that continuously builds and uplifts.
I think we learned a lot about corporate governance, the creation of sustainable businesses that are stable, that will last generations, that we can hand over to our children for the future as well.
For us, it's easy to be interested in directorship without really understanding the consequences of that decision and how it affects not only the companies, how it affects societies, how it affects the economy of the country, the global politics and the global trade.
We certainly have a leadership gap in our continent, in our country, and this is an opportunity for young aspiring leaders, but also for seasoned leaders to start engaging on principles of leadership that will address this gap and hopefully have a positive impact on our future prospects as a country and a continent.